I don't have any specific great collaboration news for anybody that's different or exciting. So I will press straight on with the presentation today. It's going to be presented by Jennifer, who has also said she'd be very grateful if I'd let my computer do the work of the video, and then she'll take over. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen and running a video, which I hope you've not all yet taken sneak previews of. And then Jennifer will come up and tell us all about what we've seen. I think she's got a couple of slides to sort of summarize it and be useful for the future. And please save all your questions for her, because I am in no way an expert on water. So if everyone's ready, let me try sharing the screen and see what happens. What I need to do is go to the right place. Hopefully you can all now see the video on the screen, and I'm just going to start running it. Should last for about 25 minutes, according to what it says here on my screen. So I hope you're going to have 25 minutes of entertainment, and then we'll be talking to you again. Good listening. Good luck.
The glorious Evenlode Valley, a protected landscape in the heart of the Cotswolds. A special place for nature and for people, but let's look beneath the surface. In fact, none of the rivers and brooks here are of good ecological status. Although at first glance the river can seem like a tranquil and beautiful place, it is now brown and murky where it was once crystal clear and teeming with life. In this film, we'll explore how the Evenlode Catchment Partnership is working together to tackle the complex issues involved. So what is the cause for the decline in the River Evenlode?
Looking for a great deal on your next trip? On Kayak, you'll find low prices for flights, hotels and car hire. Search and compare flight prices from different booking sites, as well as directly with airlines. See which hotels can be booked with free cancellation. Find a great deal on your...
So in the catchment, we have issues of surface water pesticides, issues of phosphates and sediments, all of which is contributing to a loss of biodiversity, a loss of habitat, and a loss of our Cotswold flora and fauna.
It's a pale shadow of its former self. We've got vast quantities of really damaging phosphorus and nitrate pouring into the river, and that's driving a system which has become completely impoverished.
And that's having a really bad effect on the life that these waterways are supposed to sustain. Species of fish, invertebrates are struggling, and all too often the bed of the river is just covered in a dense mat of gungy algae, diatoms, brown slime. Now there's very little water crowfoot and it's completely covered with sludge and sediment.
And we believe that loss of the larger water plants has been due entirely to the proliferation of algae, suspended algae in the river throughout the summer months, where light has literally been blocked out from the riverbed.
You cannot see the bottom of the river at all at any point that I know of.
Pump failures from sewage holding tanks, which leads to overflow into the stream. People are beginning to think very hard and should do about swimming in it.
Sewage in the river is a real issue and it is not safe to swim in.
And what this means to local residents is that, they cannot be confident in allowing their children or their pets to go into the river because it's contaminated.
Most of us who have been investigating the situation consider that the treated wastewater from our sewage works is the main culprit for providing too many nutrients in the river.
So there are some real significant problems which Thames Water have to address before the Evenlode is anything like good ecological status.
The Evenlode Catchment Partnership has a vision to restore the Evenlode to good ecological status. To do that, everyone needs to work together: landowners, communities, organisations and individuals. One of the ways individuals can help is by volunteering as citizen scientists
to establish the health of the river and to start to build a record of differences between different parts of the water catchment as to the chemistry of the water bodies, and differences in the invertebrate life.
Recently I've got involved in testing the water in the River Evenlode just below the treatment works, sewage treatment works, and it's surprising the amount of nitrates and phosphates that I've found, and you know, we're collecting lots of information to send back to Thames Water to try and persuade them that we'd like them to do more regarding polluting the river with sewage in particular.
Another way of monitoring the health of the river is to look at the number and type of invertebrates. There can be a massive difference between the health of the tributaries and the Evenlode River itself.
I'm standing in the Little Stock Brook, which at this point in Milton under Wychwood is a very healthy brook. What I'm doing here is 3-minute kick sampling. We're just going to put our sample in the monitoring tray so we can have a really good look at what's in here. We're using the identification chart provided by the Riverfly Partnership, and we can see what we're looking for. Freshwater shrimps, big mayfly nymphs, but not only normal olive nymphs, but we also have 1 or 2 blue-winged olive nymphs. So this has been a very good example of what you can get in a healthy tributary of the Evenlode.
This shows what should be seen throughout the catchment, but sadly this is not replicated further downstream, where the twin problems of agricultural runoff and sewage affects the ability of the invertebrates to survive. This impacts the entire ecosystem of the river, so we need to work with water companies and landowners in order to turn things around.
Obviously, landowners having 70% of the land in the UK under their ownership, it's huge importance that we recognise landowners' role in the countryside and in water quality. We're really lucky that in the Evenlode we've had a lot of engagement with our farmers. They're absolute pleasure to work with, and they are really the stewards of our countryside.
So what are landowners doing to tackle these issues of poor water quality, lack of biodiversity and flooding?
So this is Pudlicott Farm, and this is a biodiversity net gain project. So this is a big wetland that we've been excavating in the floodplain, and there's also elements of neutral and floodplain grassland, and also scrub and some tree planting as well.
What they're actually doing behind us is they're removing some of the topsoil and subsoil to install a series of sort of wetland areas, more ponded areas and scrapes as well.
It's good to see some of the landowners locally being foresighted enough to get involved in this.
Areas like Pudlicott are really, really important along the catchment, that we can store some water. And most importantly, you know, for Pudlicott and other farmers' ambitions is that actually there's still an element of food productivity here.
Historically, this behind us again would have been, you know, wet grassland, which would have been lovely. And over the last couple of 100 years, it's been drained. The railway was built. The land has changed its use and become intensive agriculture.
So historically, the owners of Pudlicott might have had arable on this field. It's flooded, they've lost their crops, they've therefore lost income. Whereas with a more diverse grass sward, they might actually have a more productive cattle grazing system or sheep grazing system here.
And the present owner has decided to revert that to a mixture of low intensity grazing with a few Hereford cattle and some wetlands. So The money stacks up, the ecology stacks up, I suppose what's not to like, and then there will be some remaining pieces of arable on the farm which will continue to produce food.
So we're able to balance food productivity whilst we're looking for better environmental choices too.
So the idea here is to form a series of interconnected pools, all driven by a spring-fed system that comes under the railway line. It's an old system, an old spring, which we've broken into and flooded some scrapes and pools that are still building and developing now, and pieces of wet grassland associated with it. So they will, and have already started to, bring in waders. We've had some lapwing and common sandpiper here, and the wet grassland around the pools will be ideal for a whole range of invertebrates, hopefully some amphibians and a few key species with the scrub around.
So whilst the prime driver of the project at Pudlicote is biodiversity, other projects have been aimed at reducing flooding.
We're looking to identify opportunities where we can store more water and look across the catchment, you know, where we can slow the flow, thinking of downstream who might be receiving that water in some of the flooding events, which sadly, due to climate change, might only increase or exacerbate. So with the scheme, what we've been trialling is installing a series of wetlands, scrapes across the landscape. And most importantly, that's been really exciting because farmers have led that engagement. They've really wanted to work with us and work with the ECP on this.
Going back to 2007, I think the village, Milton under Wychwood, had a level of flooding, and obviously we manage the land responsible for where the water flows come from. So in terms of doing flood management work, there wasn't many options other than putting in the measures that we've done here. Before we did the scheme, I was struggling with land drainage. So obviously the crops won't grow if they're sitting in wet soil. So having these new bunds to hold the water back is benefiting me, in as much as my drains can now run into these rather than backing up into the field. So I'm getting less flooding in the field, I'm getting better crops, and obviously massive benefit downstream that I'm holding water back to let that drain away before more water joins it.
4 billion toothbrushes are thrown away every year, and every one you've ever owned.
Biodiversity is a huge part of what's important for farmers and landowners in the Evenlode. They've inherited their farms through generations. They want to protect their natural assets and they want to see a thriving amount of biodiversity across their farms.
The primary objective was obviously to reduce flooding, but I think above that, obviously there's water quality, biodiversity benefits, woodland creation. There's the 3 online ponds that we've put in the next field. As you go down the ponds, the water quality improves in terms of sedimentation, phosphate levels. So there is a benefit. There's a lot of work going on from ourselves to get the woodland to establish properly and to maintain the habitat around them. And it'd be just nice to get the data to know that it's having a benefit, so that you can show that there is other benefits besides just the flood risk reduction. It doesn't interfere with the day-to-day farming very much. It actually improves it in most respects, and it's, I guess, what you term public money for public goods, which isn't going to be delivered anywhere else except for on farmland.
We have to produce food, we have to produce food sustainably, and we have to find a space on those farms to link up ecological diversity.
And really the biggest change that I've seen is the change in farmers' minds, that they're putting environmental services and their contribution to the environment at the forefront of their minds and at the forefront of their business decisions.
It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be glamorous, it doesn't have to be at this scale, but there are always corners, small pieces of land.
I think the emphasis of the farm is very much conservation based now. Moving forward, yes, all the sort of natural capital that we have will probably play a more significant part in our income.
Another example of the work the Evenlode Catchment Partnership has been doing is on the Blenheim estate.
We're on the River Dawn, which is a tributary of the River Glyme, which is a tributary of the River Evenlode, and we're just upstream of Blenheim Palace. Historically, the river has been dredged, it's been separated from its floodplain, meaning that only in extreme high flows does the water flow out onto the floodplain. Now that affects lots of things, can leave extremely high energies in the river system. And when you have high energies during heavy rainfall, a lot of the species, a lot of the invertebrates, a lot of the fish and a lot of the plants find it very difficult to survive. They get washed downstream. The floodplain reconnection reduces those energies under those high flows, allows the reconnection with the floodplain for species such as fish. Juvenile fish can sit on the floodplain when there's water in the floodplain instead of being entrained in an extremely fast-moving river, and then it all joins back downstream. We're moving away from very river-focused restoration because we realise the importance of looking at the whole catchment. We want to change the way that the upper catchment is managed, the way that the agriculture is carried out, because we're in a clay catchment, the rainfall runs quite rapidly down the field sides. You get a lot of sediment that runs off fields. Because the river has been dredged, it carries all that fine sediment very rapidly downstream. Our main objectives on this site was reconnection of the floodplain using natural products in a cheap and innovative way. We created 5 or 6 beaver dams using the willow from the trees that were already here. The aim of those dams being that they affect the water level behind them, which then increases the frequency with which water can flow onto the floodplain. The water flows across the floodplain, through the grassland, through the woodland, and back down into the river downstream. Because the energies are much slower in the floodplain, the sediment drops out and becomes incorporated within the floodplain, and there is also carbon storage benefits from floodplain reconnection. Over time, by using natural processes, the power of the water, the sediment deposition, multiple channels will be created, and this section here will become much wetter and develop wetland habitats.
So with this site, Lanham Estate are already noticing benefits. While the water comes out of the river, it slows down the flow, which helps in flooding situations, but it also will help in drought as well. So obviously the climate is changing, and it's these sort of projects which kind of adapt with the climate. They noticed that this field was wetter because the water had been going across it, which meant it was kind of the last area of lush grass when we were in the drought. So they were able to get their sheep on and feed them when everywhere else was dry.
The trick's going to be linking these little jewels up, these little pearls, with the string of the necklace, you know, the hedgerows and the little river systems, and making those function so that these jewels are all linked together and we build that strength, resilience and diversity.
But it's not just down to landowners to make this happen. We need the water companies to do their part as well, such as stripping the phosphate and nitrate out of the effluent, and by upgrading the sewage treatment works, capacity and infrastructure so they do not spill raw sewage.
Certainly Thames Water have a role to play in the quality, the water quality of the River Evenlode. That comes in part from discharges of untreated sewage, which we find totally unacceptable. It also comes from other sources as well, like nutrient loading that would kind of come through our sewage treatment works. However, as I'm sure people will be aware, that finances can be particularly constrained, and at the moment there are challenges that we're experiencing with inflation and other costs that have meant that we've had to reprioritise what we can achieve with the same amount of money.
And one of the problems with this project is that not only is the Evenlode polluted, but as it spills during the winter, we've got sewage treatment works dumping huge amounts of untreated sewage laden with phosphorus, which will land on these newly restored fields, and they will compromise the ability of the grass sward to meet its ecological objectives. High phosphorus levels are not good for an ecologically diverse sward, and that's what we're trying to create. So Thames Water are not only polluting the river, but they are in fact risking the success of bits of this project.
Water companies have to adequately treat our waste and enforce the highest standards to make sure that we preserve these beautiful waterways, not just for now, but for generations into the future.
The river and its catchment isn't just important for farming and for nature, it's important for the communities that live alongside it.
So our project is reaching out to both school children and general public through events and through education sessions by the river. We're educating them about water quality, and we're educating them about what they can do to preserve this very beautiful environment that needs protecting. We're doing a lot of work with kick nets and pond dipping so that the children can actually see the invertebrates that live in their streams, and they're always fascinated by that. It's one of the highlights of our field work. And we're also very proud of our Duke of Edinburgh students who've been helping with habitat management, creating new wetland habitats at a small scale using analogue beaver dams. We have now engaged with thousands of children in the last year and a half. We've also engaged with the general public through a lot of events, festivals and fairs. The interest in the river is increasing all the time. The project is really about getting children out, getting families out, and really engaging with their river, learning about it so they will love it, and when they love it, they will protect it.
All these issues, water quality, biodiversity, natural flood management, public access and engagement, are all interlinked. Changes to one impacts the others. The Evenlode Catchment Partnership is helping tackle the issues in the Evenlode by bringing all the organisations, groups and individuals together. But what is it that makes it so successful?
We have trained hydrologists, we have education specialists, we have people who are experienced in landscape restoration.
It's needed that breadth of knowledge to deliver.
Because it brings in all sorts of different groups. So us as the Environment Agency, we're working with Wild Oxfordshire, who lead the Catchment Partnership. There are local residents. There are lots of different groups involved. By involving all of the stakeholders, you're going to get such better results than if you're just trying to do it with a kind of single entity.
Most importantly, it's that we're all working together for the common goal of moving away from poor ecological status.
None of us can do this alone. It has to be a partnership, and we all have to work together. Otherwise, we're not going to reach the solution that we require.
Despite all this work, we need you to join us in this mission, whether it's helping fund our work, messing about in waders, or campaigning to make change happen.
I'd love people to look below the surface of the waters when they take a walk. Think about how your river looks. Does it look healthy?
We're very keen to get people writing to their local MPs to make sure that water quality is very high up the political agenda.
You can write to your water company. You can take samples and join the growing band of citizen scientists.
And test your water, find out what's in it, find out what lives there. And if you see a problem, don't stop until you get a solution.
If you have an hour this week, you can learn 100 songs on the piano by learning just 4 chords. These.
It's not enough for Thames Water to help fund our work. They must take action themselves to stop polluting the river.
I think people should consider very carefully about what they do with their vote. Sewage and agriculture are big issues, and you need to think very hard about who's going to give us a best return for the money that we pay and who's going to do the best things for the environment. And just keep that pressure on, because without people pressure, then the water companies and agriculture will continue to get away with pollution. Be angry, in a nice way, be angry.
And this action is necessary for all the benefits a healthy river can provide.
I'd love to be able to know that we can swim freely and enjoy the Evenlode, and that the public, can access and engage with it. I think that's important on so many levels for our mental well-being, to connect with nature.
For my grandchildren to enjoy the water and to be able to go into the water confident and see fish and catch the water bugs and see frogs and newts.
rivers that are flowing clear, where you can look through gin clear water and see the bottom.
And I'd love to see a return and increase of biodiversity and species across the Evenlode.
A really healthy river bed and plant base that are good for the invertebrates, which are the base of this really vital food chain and ecosystem.
Also for all of the land around it to be working in a great system, so farming to kind of to evolve, to be positive for nature, to increase biodiversity, because when we're looking at this, we're not looking at it just the river in isolation, we're thinking about it as a whole catchment, and that's kind of what's important.
And if we continue working together and take action before it's too late, then the river can be teeming with life once again.
Well, I hope everyone was able to see that properly and be as wowed as I was about the effects of a team of people working together. Well done, Stuart. You've started the questions with hand raising, but just to everyone else, if you'd like to ask questions, please do. Jennifer, do you want to go straight into questions, or do you want to do some presentation first?
If I could I quickly go to just to the presentation? I want to just overview the problem and give a little bit more information about the project.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll try and rattle through that very quickly. I hope you found that enjoyable and insightful. Apologies for there was a little bit of a delay on my end, but I think you got the gist of it. All right, let me see if I can share my screen.
That's a good start. Yep, we're there.
Okay, and I wonder if I can get a little bit larger for you.
Can you go into slideshow mode, maybe?
Yeah, there we go. So the Evenlode Catchment Partnership, this is a slide presentation that I've changed a little bit to be more applicable to yourselves, but it's a call to action that I deliver to groups. Water quality has been in the news recently quite an awful lot. If anybody's missed it, the news just kind of continues to keep coming. And I think there's a risk for the public to become a bit bored or blasé, thinking that nothing is going to change. But I'm hoping that I can inspire you to believe that there is an opportunity here for us to make a big difference. Water is quite a simple thing, but the problem with water is actually quite complex. So I wanted to look at the wider national picture. I'm not sure how much any of you know about how your sewage is treated. Effectively, it's a very simple process that involves gravity and bacteria. So it's very basic. Your waste comes from your home. It goes into or through a screening machine that will take out the unflushables, things like wet wipes or whatever else people have put down their toilet that shouldn't go down. And then it goes into a primary treatment tank. This tank basically just allows gravity to take all the solids to the bottom. And then the water goes into a secondary treatment, which involves bacteria. Good bacteria eating the bad bacteria. And this is open to the air. They're often, if you've ever seen them, they're usually circular tanks. And that's just a bacterial process. Then it goes through another settlement tank, and the good bacteria will effectively die off and sink to the bottom. And the sludge will be taken off. It's called cake. It'll be treated by pyrolysis or other heat treatment, and then taken to fields to be spread out and to return the phosphates and whatnot to the soil as fertilizer. And the water will go back into the river. So I wanted to just show you this to dispel any belief that there's actually a chemical treatment going on there. They're not taking any of your chemicals out. So if you put bleach down your sink or other cleaning products, that effectively does not come out. That goes into the water, into the river system. So the state of the English rivers, it's basically, we look at two different criteria, ecological status and chemical status. Unfortunately, there's not a single river in the UK that is in good chemical status. They are all below good, which is really quite disappointing. And only 14% of them are in good ecological status. Historically, we used to have an annual audit of the river prior to 2016. But in 2016, the government decided to audit the rivers every 3 years. And they tested again in 2019 and then decided they wouldn't test again until 2025. Alongside the changing of the audit, they have also changed the target for good water quality status. They initially in 2017 had set 2027 for 75% of the rivers in England to be in good ecological status. Instead, what we're seeing is a lack of monitoring and continued decline. So the last test was done in 2019. The next one's going to be in 2025, which everybody can figure isn't every 3 years anymore. And because they've looked at how they want to describe chemical status, they've changed the clean water target for from 2027 to 2063. So in many of our lifetimes, we won't actually see good ecological health and chemical health in the rivers. I wanted to show you this slide so that you could see where your river basin ranks ecologically. Where we're at in the Cotswolds, we're number 10. We have 3% of our rivers that are in good ecological status. Everybody else is better than us, so I hope that's good news for you, even if it's quite low. So the pollution problems, the top three nationally are sewage, agriculture, and runoff from roads. In the Evenlode, we have about 65% of our sewage is the contaminant, and then 35% is the agriculture. 18% of the water quality failures in England are also down to road runoff. There are approximately 18,000 drains and outfalls from roads, and that's taking tire crumb and all of the chemicals that are on the roads and putting that straight into the river system and creating a lot of contamination that way as well. These aren't monitored. The road system is not monitored at all. So looking at the sewage, Thames Water has been one of the leading water companies in putting on something called event duration monitor maps. They have monitors at each of their sewage treatment facilities, and you can look online to see what's happening live. So if we have a significant rainfall, we can look on the internet and see that whether or not the sewage treatment facilities along our river system are discharging raw sewage into the river. What happens is that if there's a lot of rainfall, the water treatment facilities become overwhelmed with the volume that comes through, and they just effectively discharge raw sewage and everything that comes with it into the river because they don't have that storage tank facility to actually capture all of that. So that's kind of leading the problem. So the Thames Water Map, the red signifies that they are currently discharging. Amber, they have been discharging in the last 48 hours. And green is they haven't discharged in the last 2 days. There's a new map that's come out that you see on the right of the screen. This one is from sewagemap.co.uk. They have a very similar structure, but actually what they will do is you can look at the sewage treatment facilities and see how many hours have been discharged in the last 3 months, 6 months, or a year. And we did this at the end of the year for 2023 to look at what the discharge was for the Evenlode, which is a 45-mile long river, and with, I think, 13 sewage treatment facilities. And we had 11,350 hours of raw sewage dumped into our rivers. So looking at the two kind of primary pollutants that we might be looking at if we are testing, we look at nitrates and phosphates. The nitrates for the Evenlode are 35%, and it's generally coming from animal waste and also septic systems that may not be working for whatever reason. There's also some that comes from the atmosphere, from the natural nitrate cycle, but also fertilized crops play a factor in this. But again, it's not in our area a significant or as significant as the sewage pollution that's coming. So the phosphates, this is a national picture actually, the total phosphate loads from agriculture, household, and industry. They've broken it down, and you can see that actually households are responsible for nearly 75% of phosphates that go into the river. And this is quite huge, actually, because a lot of people want to just point the finger at agriculture, but the responsibility lies with homeowners, really. And this pie chart just kind of breaks it down a little bit more. We've obviously got our urine and our feces, which we can't really change that too much. But if you look at 9% is your auto dishwashing tablets. So these actually have quite a significant impact on the river. And also the DLCP are domestic laundry and cleaning products. That's 7%. And even your toothpaste is down to 1% of the phosphate load nationally. So, things that you might not necessarily consider do play a significant role in how our rivers are the river health overall, the chemical health. So with our outreach, we talk to people a lot about what our personal responsibility is, starting at home with whether or not we maintain our septic tanks, putting tick and flea treatment onto our pets. That has a significant impact. If you put topical treatment on your dog and then let them into the river or any local water body, even giving them a spray down in the garden can have an impact on aquatic environments. One of the two ones that I like to take to festivals and talk about are fairy liquid and duck, because both of those have warning symbols on the back, and they say that they cause harm to aquatic environments with lasting consequences. A lot of people are using this, and every single person I ask that says that they use it, are shocked. They've never read the back of the carton and don't realize that they're actually having a negative impact on their local rivers by using these products. We also encourage people to look at alternatives like Faith in Nature and other dishwashing tablets like Ecover and that sort of a thing. Wanted to talk a little bit about plastics in water. Everybody knows that plastic is a huge problem, but actually we every single week we take in through our breathing, through our skin, and through drinking and eating a credit card's worth of plastic every single week on average, which is quite shocking, I think. We don't know what the long-term health impacts of this might be, but we do know that some of these chemicals, some of these plastics do bioaccumulate in our bodies and will most likely have more of a significant impact on the next generation coming up, because they will have been exposed to it a lot earlier and for a lot longer. There's also a lot of plastic problems with things like the fake grass or astroturf, because that breaks down slowly over time in the sun and in the weather, and that gets washed into the streams. And of course, large things like bottles of water. I would like to encourage you not to buy plastic bottled water, because there's actually a lot more plastic microparticles in your plastic bottles of water than what you get out of your tap. So we often encourage people not to invest in that sort of a short-term solution, because it's a false sense of security, as it were. So this is a picture of some tire residue that's come off of the M4. The BBC has just covered this in the last week. Tire particles, as they break down through wear and tear on the roads, they release microplastics, heavy metals, toxic chemicals like arsenic, and carcinogenic compounds. With the 18,000 plus outfalls and drains on our roads, these are effectively going straight into our ecosystems. And unfortunately, the Environment Agency is not regularly monitoring this. I'm not sure if everybody's aware of what PFAS and PFOS are. They are forever chemicals, which is to say that they are persistent and ubiquitous. They will take over 1,000 years to break down. They're often found in things like our nonstick food packaging, our nonstick pans, food packaging, AstroTurf, school uniforms, carpets, clothing, furniture, firefighting foam. And these things are starting to become a significant factor in our waterways, because once they're in the system, we can't get them out. So in the Evenlode, we were quite shocked to see this river pollution report come out recently. It shows that we have the highest concentration of PFOS in the UK in our river. And we think that this is possibly linked to the fire college that is located at the very start of the Evenlode River. But you can also find these things in your waterproof clothing. So if you're washing your clothing that have PFOS or PFAS in them regularly, they will be going into the river system. PFAS, I should mention, was banned about 15 years ago. But again, these things will last for over 1,000 years. So, so we're going to be seeing high levels of these for quite a long time. So I think when you look at the overall picture, it can be really, really overwhelming and quite depressing. So we need a big old pinch of stubborn optimism that's going to be required to make this positive change that's required for future generations. It takes approximately 3.5% of the population to shift the political agenda. And with my outreach, I try and ask people to work within their sphere of influence and then expand it. So if they take their dog for a walk and it goes into the stream and it gets violently ill afterwards, you know, we encourage people to share their story on social media or to contact Thames Water if they see that there is a pollution event happening near them. And obviously, you know, different people have different levels of influence. So we would ask people that hold a political role to try and really consider water in everything they do. So taking it back to the ECP, it's quite a unique organization. We are funded by Thames Water, and there are about 30 different partners that are involved in the project, which runs to 2025. It's broken into 4 different areas: the biodiversity, habitat, and landscape, which is generally covered by Wild Oxfordshire, and then water quality and advocacy is covered by Earthwatch, the Earthwatch Institute in Oxford. And we have natural flood management, which is overseen by a couple of different organizations. And then Cotswold National Landscape, which I am community outreach officer for, covers education, access, and recreation. This is just a quick map of the Evenlode. As I said, it's about 45 miles in length. It has a couple of different tributaries. This just shows some of our recent outreach, both education and the community outreach. We try and go outside of the catchment to bring in groups from Oxford to explain why the river is important. Obviously, our water flows down that direction and will have a significant impact on them as well. We do a lot of schools outreach. Depending on the age group, we might do something like pond dipping with the very young primary students. We've actually had our first school come on board as a citizen science eco school. So the students will be going down to their river and testing the water every single month and reporting back to Earthwatch on their findings, trying to really encourage, you know, the children towards a sense of stewardship and responsibility for their local water. Also, we're looking at, or we have been working with GCSE level students and A-level students to try and actually get them out into the field, because you can't really learn about the environment if you're stuck inside a classroom all the time. And then every single month we've got a Duke of Edinburgh group of students that come to Coombe Mill, and we engage them in basically local conservation projects and water quality testing. So my primary drive is citizen science. I'm trying to get the communities really interested in their river, to get them down into the river and interacting. We do things like river fly surveying, which is looking at the invertebrates. This is something that the Environment Agency actually takes seriously. If there's a significant decrease in the invertebrate populations, then they will come and investigate. We've been doing things like water vole surveying, asking people to look at doing some of the amphibian surveys that are happening nationally, and that's actually happening right now. I think Frog Life is doing that. We do some nature restoration work with locals, soil sampling, looking at priority habitats, which is something that Natural England and the Freshwater Biological Association is doing, trying to have communities go out and assess their local ponds and rivers to determine which areas need to be preserved and which ones need to be restored. Outfall safaris are effectively, if we have a really high nitrate or phosphate load, walking the actual river and looking for pipes. There's a surprising number of communities that have outfalls, which are just pipes leading into the river and dumping water from wherever, that aren't actually on the map. So looking for those sources and trying to determine where the contamination is coming from. We also ask people to do things like just put the apps iNaturalist or Seek onto their phones. So when they're out and about walking, they can just take pictures of various things, and that gives us more of an idea about the biodiversity of the area overall. And of course, we do an awful lot of water quality testing. Every single walk that we do, every single outreach involves water quality testing. And this is just quickly to show you, water quality testing is really, really simple to do. The citizen scientists that do this are given little containers with reactant agents to determine the nitrates and the phosphates. Nitrates are a 3-minute test, and we just look at the color variation on a sliding chart to determine whether it's good, moderate, or poor. And it's 5 minutes for testing the phosphates. We also look at turbidity to see how many particles are actually floating around. What the visibility is for the water there. That's on the right-hand side. We try and engage people in a lot of community action. This might be arranging for a sewage treatment facility tour for parish councillors and concerned citizens. We've held an Earth Day event where we got kids down building leaky dams to try and slow down the water. The outfall safaris, again, the Duke of Edinburgh, and just really trying to get a sense of ownership with the communities and empower them towards action. I think that's really, really important, because a lot of people right now feel that there's nothing that they can do. But by educating them and giving them opportunity to take responsibility, I think we're really encouraging people to make that positive change that's required. We also suggest that people report problems. Oftentimes people will see sewage treatment events, sewage discharge events, and they don't know what to do. So we've developed some business cards that we hand out to people, asking them to call the Environment Agency and report problems, and to get that incident number so that they know that they're being taken seriously. And then secondarily, to contact Thames Water on their website to report the problem. Thames Water says that they will be there within a couple of hours to actually look into it. And hopefully that's generating a lot more proactive action. And also to take photos and videos and to tell us about it so that we can help follow through and to share things like that on social media so that other people are aware. Also, the Environment Agency and Thames Water have a duty to make available environmental information on request. So we encourage anyone who has a question about how their water is treated, if anything is being done locally with regards to manhole covers, any question that they may have, to actually raising an environmental information request to find out the answer to that. And we do encourage people to be very accurate about their question, because if you give a fluffy question, you'll get a fluffy answer. So if you really need to be very, very specific in what you're requesting from them. And then what local authorities and councils can do, just a list of suggestions potentially to help you get an idea of what you might be able to do within your own role. Definitely lobbying Parliament is quite important. We need to empower local planning authorities to be able to object to new developments and that sort of thing. Sorry, did you have a question? No, okay. And trying to get involved in planning applications, which is really key. There are lots of things around water that we can look at to slow the flow of water, be it things like rainwater capture and rain gardens, but also looking to make sure that the sewage infrastructure is suitable to be able to deal with larger populations. What we have happening in the Cotswolds right now is lots of development, but actually we know that the infrastructure cannot support the new developments and the new homes. So we're actually trying to legally stop occupation of those homes, so that there's just not rampant development and further pressure on the sewage system. Local councils and communities can also apply for local bathing water status. It's really quite hard to get. We don't think that any of the communities in Evenlode can actually achieve this status because the government hasn't taken into consideration, I think, rural populations. There's no way that we're going to get 100 bathers down every single day during the water bathing season to paddle in our rivers. And certainly we don't want to encourage people to paddle in the rivers anymore because they are contaminated. And also you have to have toilet facilities within 500 meters of the location. So it's quite impossible really for us. And also to remember water, because water is essential to life. And so if you are putting together a biodiversity plan, net zero neighborhood or climate plans, to remember the role that water plays, because clean water is essential and vital to life. So to really consider that in every aspect of your plans that you put forward. And also to fund local citizen science water quality monitoring programs, because as I explained at the very beginning of the presentation, the Environment Agency is not doing an annual audit on the rivers. And whilst no one's looking, there's an awful lot of damage being done. So if we can get the communities out there regularly testing, we can continue to look at river health and feed that back to the Environment Agency with our concerns. And this is one of my favorite quotes. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And with that, I will entertain your questions.
Would you like to unshare your screen, please, Jennifer?
Well, it was easy enough. There we go. Stop share. I see it.
There we go. Well done. Thank you. So thank you very much. That was great stuff. I'm looking for hands being raised. There we go, Stuart. Well done.
I would just like to say thank you very much for a very informative, slightly prolonged session. Obviously a fantastic amount of work has gone into that, and I take my hat off to you. One thing I was wondering about though, and it's something which farmers do locally here, is I forgot what you called it now, the sludge from the sewage works. And it's been heat treated so it doesn't smell or anything. But I gather that contains a lot of microplastics. And I was wondering if you'd looked at the microplastic runoff into the rivers. There was a report out in the New Scientist very recently. They'd been looking at microplastics in soil for well over 100 years. And since the 1960s, they found increasing amounts, certainly on fields which have had either inorganic or organic fertilizers applied. And I was wondering if you'd seen any of this runoff into the river.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely coming off the river, and it's not just the microplastics, it's also the PFAS chemicals, the forever chemicals. In the States, they've had to shut down farms due to contamination of PFAS and microplastics because the crops and the livestock have, the concentrations in them are so high that they can't be sold off for food. So yeah, it's a really, really serious problem, and it's not something that is, I think, being adequately addressed yet. What do we do with our poop? If we can't put it back onto the fields, which are desperate for phosphorus because it's being washed away or used by farming practices. We need to find another solution for that. And I do know that Thames Water has talked about pyrolysis, so heating it up to high temperatures and using it for energy. But they're not doing that just now. And it's something that they're considering in the future. But nothing's really being done, I'm afraid. No one's monitoring.
Well, we just seem to be recycling them at the moment. So we take them out of the raw sewage in the sediment tanks, put them back on the soil, and back into the food chain.
Yep. And it's not the healthiest option, I'm afraid.
No. Okay, thank you.
Nick, would you like to have a go, please?
Hi, everybody. I'm not sure where people are from in this call. I'm from the River Wye catchment, which actually is a little bit different, as I'm sure you know, from a lot of what you presented there. By the way, congratulations. I thought that was really wonderful, and I'll be drawing that to the attention of a lot of people in this neck of the woods, because I thought it was quite a comprehensive walk around the park altogether, both the video but also your presentation, Jennifer. Thank you. The River Wye actually has a particular problem, which is intensive poultry or intensive agriculture, but particularly poultry, which accounts for 70% of the phosphate pollution in the River Wye. And although the River Wye is a much bigger river, it now looks a lot like the Evenlode that we saw earlier on. But for that reason, those of us in this area are focused much more on agro-industry than on the misdemeanors of water companies. But I particularly put my hand up because of what was just said a moment ago, which I've been banging on about for a couple of years now at least. You can't see this in my background, but I'm in a little house in the middle of 150 acres of farmland, and I've lived here for many, many years. But about 5 years ago, I suddenly noticed an enormous pile of black stuff out on the farm just 100 meters away from my house. And when I inquired, this turned out to be what I've always understood to be called biosolids, but I think you called it cake. And that is the solids that come out of the sewage treatment works. And like you just said, there is hardly any attention has been paid to this. Yeah. I made some inquiries and was pretty horrified by what I was being assured, which didn't seem to me to be very persuasive at all, because as you pointed out, in relation to the liquid element of sewage, for example, bleach isn't taken out. I wonder how many people realize that every time they stick bleach down the toilet, that's going straight into the river and not being taken. And it's a similar kind of story with the biosolids. In fact, the very first thing I did was to simply Google up biosolids or whatever and discovered not a kind of environmental website at all, but an industry website to do with waste treatment was talking about how many nasties there are in biosolids. And this is going back, 5 years now? And in fact, I once met a farmer locally who had used biosolids on his land in about 2005, 2010, who was not an environmentalist at all, but had decided that after a couple of years, he looked at his land and he thought, I don't want to do this any longer, because he'd noticed that the degradation of the soil and everything was coming. So there are some really big problems. Agro-industry is one that I would like to go on about, but I don't want to take up time from other people. And I'm not sure if you would just like to comment on whether you know about the River Wye situation. Incidentally, River Action, as we speak right now, is down in Cardiff taking legal action against the Environment Agency for not having done its proper job. But the reason it hasn't done its proper job is because of politics. And I hope everybody here understands that the reason the Environment Agency has not done a proper job is not because of accident, but because of political policies that have deliberately underfunded and underregulated the whole situation. Anyway, that's my little sixpence worth. I wonder what you'd have to say in reply to that.
Yeah, no, Nick, it's brilliant that you're kind of aware and being curious. I think, seeing something show up that doesn't look right is a great starter into to the myriad of problems that are the water treatment issues. Yeah, I think, to the Environment Agency point, they have lost a significant amount of their funding and lost an awful lot of staff. So there's no way that they're going to actually be able to really investigate. We kind of have an understanding that if you see a pollution event, if you see feces and whatnot floating down your river and you contact the Environment Agency and you say, oh, there's a sewage discharge event happening, they will ask, are there any dead fish? And if there aren't, which there won't be because most of them are already dead, they won't come and investigate because it's not a major incident. That 14% of our rivers are in good ecological health, and that's just not good enough, I think, for a country that is it's a first world country, so it just seems incredibly insane that that it is in this current state. But there is no one monitoring, and this is why we really kind of push back to the citizen scientists. And you're not treating for bacteria. There's a ton of pharmaceuticals in your water. It should be shocking people, but I think we're becoming a little bit callous to the problem and feeling overwhelmed and that we can't actually do something. So I think that's where, we need the push from the ground up, to Parliament to say, actually, you need to have stricter regulations and you need to actually have some teeth to it. Because Thames Water, its main goal is to drive profit for its shareholders. So it's not required to invest in its infrastructure or to upgrade the systems in Denmark. The water treatment facilities there, they're actually putting in new treatment facilities and getting rid of stuff that is above the standard that what we have in the UK. So the stuff that they are replacing, I wish we could send over some big freight containers and bring them over here because, they're getting rid of stuff that's better than what we've got. We are dependent on gravity and bacteria. And that's crazy because, the pharmaceuticals, everything that's going into the river, it's going to come back to us. In London, 80% of their tap water comes from the Thames.
Mm.
And if we leave it to water companies to actually report their own pollution events, which they do, then how are we going to be confident in our drinking water that comes back to us? As one of the slides, sorry. So one of the slides illustrates that the European standards are much higher than what they are here. So we're regularly told, oh, but we do have standards and they are quite high. But actually, when you look at what other countries are doing, they're really, really quite low. So I think we need to push for that.
Can I just come back for one moment just to emphasize, we are in an election year. And as I said earlier, and I think you sort of more or less agreed, none of this is accidental. This has been absolutely deliberate government policy for about 15 years, is to underfund regulation and to oppose regulation. This is where you get to when you elect these kinds of people with these kinds of ideologies, is that this is the end result. People need to understand that. If you don't like what you see, you need to change who's in power in this country. It's that simple.
I think it's quite phenomenal that actually, as British citizens, you don't have a right to clean water. And in the American Constitution, there is no right to have clean water, that's quite incredible because it's something that's required to have a healthy life, and a healthy ecosystem. So to my mind, that should be actually written in law, that we have a right to that. Was there another question?
Amanda?
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm one of Jennifer's biggest fans. all the work that they're doing. I'm just delighted to even have a small part to play in it. But what I wanted to really emphasise is we could all watch this and be totally overwhelmed with where to start in our own area. Unless you're somebody like Nick, for example, and Stuart and others that have spoken that are already actively involved in something that's already organised, if you like, or you have a reason and a knowledge, a background to get involved. So for me, some of the things locally that I think are lessons is Morton in Marsh Town Council, for example, simply funded some of those chemical kits to do the nitrate and phosphate testing. And I think it was under £100. It was something like that. You know, it's not a lot of money that could be, and it could be that there are citizen scientists out there or keen enthusiasts for whatever reason who just never knew that they could kind of ask their parish council for a small grant. You know, something as simple as that. If you bought that chemical and handed it over, then you could put that into your biodiversity plan that we're all duty bound to have now. So it's thinking about what of all of the presentation that we've had today, and we can all watch it back and, you know, fast forward or reverse back to the relevant bits. But there are quite a few things in there that we can take from today's extensive presentations to say, what can we do at a small parish or town council without much knowledge, resource, etc. There's absolutely loads we can do, actually. And thank you very much for the opportunity for Jennifer to present today. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you. You can look to Earthwatch for the kits, for the phosphates and nitrate testing kits, but also the Angling Association. I think they test more than what Earthwatch will give you. And actually a lot of their research and their data is coming back, and it's really helping to push for change. So either one of those two, Earthwatch or the Anglers, yeah, they're really good.
Well, it's brilliant stuff. I noticed that a lot of councils nowadays are declaring a climate emergency, and then they say, so now what?
Yeah.
You have to come up with the climate action plan. And I really loved your suggestion that you put water into the climate action plan, because most people tend to forget about it or never even think about it. So that was a great point. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and there was a question on whether or not the water quality is improving. I would say absolutely not. You know, the fox will play while the farmer is away, kind of a thing. Nobody's monitoring, so I think it's actually just getting worse and worse. And I think it is part of the plan is, you know, shut things down, and then we're going to turn around and look, and it's going to be in such a state that it's nigh impossible to fix.
I'm doing some work to lead on neighbourhood plan in my area at the moment, and Jennifer had a look through the a very outlined draft of the main headings, and I put under sustainability around green spaces, and Jennifer said to me, well, what about the blue spaces? And we were all used to using that term green space, but rarely blue space. So I just offer that as a gift to anybody that's got the opportunity to pop in that word blue space and then see what you want to write under it. It's amazing how it opens the door to a range of different things you want to talk about, from flooding to water quality to you know, new developments and what requirement you want there for runoff. What about grey water capture? You know, your rainwater. What about animals getting into the waterways? You know, it just goes on and on. But unless you've got that heading put in blue space, like we do green space, you just don't ever open that door. You don't think to, or I didn't. So that's my bit.
Well, you're getting lots of nods, Amanda, so thank you. Does anybody else have any questions that they're burning to ask, please? Okay, let me just say that we have made a recording of this session. We do have Amanda's, rather, I'm hoping to get a copy of Jennifer's slides. And then I will send them all out to everybody, along with a copy of some of the really useful suggestions in the chat sessions. So you will all get a copy, which you're very free to keep, maintain, or just chuck in the waste bin, whichever you wish. But Jennifer, I think Nick said it all, that obviously a huge amount of work went into your presentation. It was very worthwhile. Thank you very much. And we seem to be continuing to raise the bar in these sessions, so well done. and Amanda would like a last word.
No, that's not a last word. That's a massive big clap. And I think I'm joined by Nick and a few others.
Yeah. Nick, did you want to speak?
No. Well, thank you all for your time, and
it was a hand clap.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for your time. Next week, I should have thought of what we are going to talk about. I know something next week. No, I think next week is a gap. I may well ask people to start thinking about what they'd like the Great Collaboration website to include as it develops. But don't take my word on it just yet. There's a bit of a thought process going on. But thank you so much for your time. I hope you all found it worth it, and I look forward to the next one. Bye-bye.